I've sold seven figures of sports cards over the past 20 years, and there is one thing as a card investor that I absolutely do not do, and that is buying graded base cards. And so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why I don't like buying graded base cards as an investment and what I think is a much better alternative. And so as we start into this video, I want to be clear. There is a big difference between buying a card that's already graded versus buying a card to get it graded. So if we're talking about, buying a raw card, getting it graded, flipping it, do that. That's fine with base cards. Do it all day long as the numbers make sense to do so. I do that play. But when it comes to buying cards that are already graded, I cannot stand the concept of buying a graded base card as an investment. And so let's dig into this a little bit, and I'll show you a few examples here. So when we look at this Victor Wembanyama Prism base card, so it's card number 136 here, we look at the chart, and what we see is very, very comparable to a lot of the other charts that I'll show you, where these cards start off hot and then they fall and then they fall and then they fall some more. And this is over the past couple of years now, where we've seen his cards just completely fall off of a cliff and continue to fall. And the thing that happens here, and some of the like market forces that are kind of impacting the value, is that this card is pop 26,000. That means there are 26,000 PSA 10 copies of this card out there. That is not rare whatsoever. And what that means is that there are so many copies of this card sitting on eBay at any point in time that someone could go out and buy, that there is you have no control over the value at all. When you are listing your card for sale, you've got to compete with 300 other copies of that same exact card that are readily available on eBay. Many of them are going to be listed at auction. So let's say this card is selling for $75 right now. Well, if I think I can get, maybe 100 out of it, why would someone pay $100 for that card when they can just wait for the next one to show up at auction and pay exactly 75? Because that's what market price seems to be for that card right now. So that is the first reason why I don't like buying graded base cards, because there's really no rarity. There's nothing unique about your card when you're dealing in a card that 26,099 other people also have. And so you're kind of stuck with taking what the market gives you on that. So let's hop out of the pop report here. And what I want to show you is this chart. So you can see that the cards, again, they start off hot when there's only a few copies, but as more of those copies hit the PSA 10 pop report, or they hit the pop report as PSA 10s and hit eBay, you just see this downward pressure because the supply is rising so fast. Even if demand is rising a little bit, if he's having a great year, he's exceeding expectations on the court, he was very good as a basketball player, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that every single one of his cards are going to rise. And so what's happening here is there are so many of these cards on the market that it's just putting, Wemby in a really difficult spot to where he has to do the most amazing thing that you could possibly imagine on the court for there to be a big influx of demand that matches and then exceeds the supply. And that's how values would ultimately rise here. But when there are 26,000 of them, that's so hard for any player to do. And so I'm going to show you a football example here. So let's look at Jaden Daniels, and you'll see for his base Prism rookie card, the exact same pattern of the chart, where they start off hot here. The first few copies hit the market and they sell strong, and then more and more hit the market. He's the rookie from last year's quarterback class that, he was the best player by far and had arguably one of the best rookie seasons of all time. And so even a guy like that, more of these cards are getting graded and values are just dropping and dropping and dropping some more. And even going into the season here, where we often see for a lot of players, we'll see a little bit of an uptick going into the season. Well, there's still so many of these cards that are hitting the pop report right now. There are still so many of them sitting on eBay that are just readily available that the supply is enormous, and it's making it so it's like forcing values to kind of stay put, even though there's added interest going into the football season. So here's another example where we see that same exact pattern in the chart here. And I'll show you yet another one. CJ Stroud, the guy from the year prior to Jaden Daniels. So Stroud was the 2023 best rookie coming out of football, or that rookie class for football. And then you have his same exact pattern here, where we have the first couple copies start off really hot. They start to taper off, and they just keep falling more and more and more. And now we're just pretty flat. And look at this, his pop report, almost 8,000 PSA 10. So it's nothing like the 26,000 that we have for Wemby, but that's still so many of this card, guys. And that's what holds back the values from rising any higher. And again, if you're someone that has one of these cards, if this thing is going for 38, 35, 40, 45, like you're not going to get $60 for this card because there's so many of them out there. And so this is why I don't like PSA 10 graded base cards as an investment. You are putting yourself, you're boxing yourself in, and you're just saying like, okay, I'm going to buy a card that so many other copies exist that I have zero influence over the value when I go to sell. So let me give you two alternatives. One, we already talked about, so that is to go ahead and buy raw cards that, the upside's there. We want to make sure there's big time upside, and we want to make sure the cards are clean enough condition, obviously, to have a chance at getting a PSA 10. But if we can check those two boxes, buy raw cards all day and send those things off for grading. You're going to do really well on that play for a lot of players. Again, the math has to make sense and you have to know what you're looking for condition wise, but you can win big on that. The other thing that I like to do, and this is more specifically if I'm targeting cards that are already graded. So a lot of times I'll play the seasonal swings is what I call them, but it's, you start to understand the patterns in the card market and you see that leaving the season, as we exit the season, there's oftentimes a softening of values for even key cards of key players. And so this creates a buying window where you can buy when everyone's kind of focused elsewhere. For football, when the Super Bowl happens in February, a lot of people are getting ready for baseball. So it's kind of like the teams that have been out of the hunt for a while, the teams that didn't make the playoffs, those guys, even the good players, the rising stars, the key quarterbacks, so those guys are just out of sight and out of mind for a bit. And so that gives you this opportunity where sometimes you can scoop up really good cards for cheap relative to where they will be on the way into the next season when the interest tends to pick back up. And so if we go back to the Stroud chart here, I'm going to show you an example of a different Stroud card, also from Prism. But if we look at this white sparkle, you'll see that there are far fewer of this card. There are only 10 in the pop report, so there's only 10 PSA 10s of this card. It's a very rare parallel to begin with. And you'll see there was a little bit of an uptick, and then the values kind of go up and down a little bit here. But I want to focus on just these last three sales. So it hit 9K, it hit 9,100, and this is, back in December of 24 and January of 25. But then in June of 2025, it's up to almost 11 grand again. Why is that? Well, you can't find another copy of this card for $9,000 or $9,100. Like the people that have these cards aren't going to sell for this price. And so that means that if you're someone who wants to buy one of these cards, you have no choice but to pay this seller's price. And that's the thing that gives you a leg up. If you are that seller, you have something that has some rarity attached to it where you can dictate the price, and you can't force someone to pay your price. But if you try to do this with a Prism base card, everyone's going to laugh at you, right? Like there's no control when you're talking about a card where there's 1,000 copies readily available on eBay at any point in time. But if you're the only one that has that PSA 10 white sparkle parallel and someone wants a nice card of CJ Stroud, again, football season's picking up the excitement for football season, we're going into the season. So of course there's going to be some more interest for CJ Stroud. And that is the reason why you can sometimes do a little bit better on like a rare parallel like that, even when the base card from the exact same set is still on its way down and pretty flat and hasn't really picked up at all, nor do I expect it to. So anyway, just a couple examples there. We'll do one last one here and I'll show you. Let's go back to Wembanyama. So if you remember the base Prism, I'll show you one more time just so you can recall what this chart looks like. Pop 26,000 and it just kind of goes like this. And I think of this, it's almost like an L shape, and maybe that is on purpose. Maybe the universe is trying to tell us something there because this is a losing play. But if we look at a parallel of this card, and so that white sparkle is kind of an extreme example because that's super expensive. I mean, it's super rare where there's only a handful of those. Let's do a parallel, but that's a more common parallel. So we'll look at an orange ice here. This is one where there are far more copies than the white sparkle of Stroud. And so you'll see it's pop 1028. Still a lot of PSA 10s, especially for a parallel. They just printed a ton of this set. And that's okay. You just got to pick your battles and pick your entry points and which cards are going to have a chance to actually rise over time. But you can see from this chart, okay, yeah, they started off a little bit hotter than they are now maybe, but you can still see there are some more peaks and valleys. And that's the way that I would interpret this chart is basically you're looking at a card where there are definitely going to be multiple copies on eBay at once, but they might not all be priced fairly, or they might not all be at auction, or it might, be a scenario where where you can actually get a little bit more influence over the price because there aren't as many copies as there are with the base card. So when we're looking at some of I'll highlight a couple of the peaks and valleys here, 315, 320. This high example went for 456. Another one went for 440. Another one went for 475, 432. And so you're starting to see more of the sales kind of pick up a little bit. And, basketball season isn't too far off from where we are in the calendar year, at least at the time of this recording here. So, it makes some sense that there would be a little bit of pickup of interest in this card. And because there are 1,000 of them and not 26,000 of them, that is what gives you a little bit more control when you go to price this thing. And you can hold out for 475, even if a copy went for 350, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, because there aren't going to be that many other copies that people can turn to if you don't take a lower price. That forces people to decide, do I want this card and pay this seller's price, or do I just not get the card? And that is what ultimately, as a seller, that can work really well in your favor. So the key takeaways here are, I don't like buying graded base cards because I don't want to have to compete with 5,000, 10,000, 26,000 other people that have the same exact card. That just puts you in a position where it's a race to the bottom price-wise. I'd rather have way more control. So if I'm buying something that's already graded, my play is to target something that has at least a little bit of rarity attached to it. And if you can't afford a white sparkle that's a pop 10 of CJ Stroud, fine, that's okay. You can target one of these retail parallels that has a little bit more rarity attached to it. It's a little less common of a card where someone's going to have to, again, decide, do I pay this seller's price or do I just skip the card because I can't find another copy of it? And that is where you want to be if you're a seller, instead of being forced to take what the last 10 copies went for because your card is not common. The alternative is to, of course, buy cards that are raw, send them off for grading, make your money that way. So I hope this video helps and gives you some things to at least think about. But if you like this stuff and you're looking for more strategy, you're looking for more structure, more of a system to follow to level up in the card space, I run a program called Ignite where I help people learn the exact system that I've used myself to generate a very meaningful side income and now full-time income with sports cards. And so if you want to learn more about that, I'll leave a link in the description. It'll take you to a page that looks something like this where you can learn more about it and decide whether or not you want to be a part of it. So with that, we'll wrap this up. Hope this is helpful and we'll see you on the next one.